This is Francis Schaefer, Precision Soil Management, Redfield, South Dakota. Good morning. I'd like to discuss some trials we did on some fields using biologicals and a catalyst and starter fertilizer. This is the field. This is a soil management zone delineated by Jim Miller from Precision Soil Management. You can see the different zone types, but that doesn't mean anything to you guys. We set up a number system. Number one is this soil here. It's lower in the landscape, thicker topsoil, very highly productive unless it gets too wet. Zone two is upland soil. If you can get to it in the spring, you will always be able to plant it. And if you plant it, you'll always be able to harvest it if you can get to it. Zone 4, eroded knobs. They're thinner topsoil, low organic matter, high pH. Uh, they can be productive, but um, they'll have low phosphorus soil test numbers too. Zone 10 is soil that is white on top. It's highly salty, very saline. Zone 21, which kind of sits around the zone 10, salt a little bit deeper in the profile. It can be productive, but you have to have the uh, right crop, right rainfall. Zone 16, it's gravel right to the surface. It's not mineable. Zone 17 are depressions. They can drown out if you get too much moisture. Zone 19, right here, the majority of this there's a ridge here that runs this way, is sand. It can be highly productive in the right season, but you have to have that. This field was planted using a prescription, and here's the rate map. So the highest was 30 in the zone 17s, lowest was 14 in the zone 16s. 19 was probably 20, something like that. 27 would be zone 1. Zone 2 would be like 25, 26.5, something like that. This is the actual planting map. Now, this is the trial. There are 3 situations. The green one is the variety, and this was put in with the starter with their standard program for corn, which was starter, and the catalyst of generate from ignition. One trial was replacing the starter with water, generate, and then the biological BX ignite. The other trial was the starter with the generate plus the BX ignite. So they did this with their 16 row planter, and they made rounds and then they skipped and made rounds. So this turned out to be 105 acres, this area that they did the test in, side by side across that field with all that variability. So this is the grain harvest map. Okay, Now it's kind of interesting. I did a little horsing around with the legend on the yield. Now remember, these are the gravel hills, and then surrounded by the sand. So they yielded, um, well, the purple 0 to 20. There's 1.5 acres of that, but the dark orange is 20 to 65. There's 9 acres, almost 10 acres of that. But then if you start getting up here towards the top end, you're looking at 200 to 250 bushel. There's 32 acres of that. And then 170, 200, there's another 32 acres. So this has some very productive soil, provided it gets the rainfall and has a good growing environment. We did not have a good growing environment in the early life of this corn. Um, May was hot, dry, and windy, and followed by June the same way. So then what I did is I cut, this is the area of the, um, what I sampled. I cut off the ends, I cut off the headlands, I cut off the bottom, the top. Now this is what I analyzed. And let me look at that. Yeah, that's what I analyzed, 97.5 acres. So what did I learn? I'm going to go here, and this is what I learned. I did an analysis of yield, average yield, by management zone, by the trial, and then I sorted it from highest to lowest. Zone 17 is the most productive soil out there if it doesn't get too wet. Zone 1 is next if it doesn't get too wet. Zone 2, upland, always raises a crop. 21, which is kind of surprising, did awfully well. Zone 4, eroded knobs. 19, sand. Um, Averaging in the 115 to 120. That's pretty damn good. Zone 16 is gravel. So what did we learn? Well, starter plus generate plus ignite, water plus generate plus ignite. Here's the cost of each of those starters, just the components. Here's the yield difference in zone 17 for those three trials. Here are the acres for those three trials of zone 17. So you can see the cost. So what I did is the total starter cost is the selling price, and I just picked a number, times the yield difference plus the original starter cost. So you can see which starter not only cost you money, it cost you yield. And those are the costs of each. So then we get to zone 1, starter plus generate ignite. It yielded the best, but it wasn't the best cost. It didn't make enough money to pay for itself above water generate and ignite. So you go to zone 2, starter plus generate, that's the um, standard protocol for these guys. Then you get water generate and ignite. Of course, if you're only looking at bushels, this is what you see. But if you look at the base cost plus the yield cost, the best one is water generate and ignite on zone 2. Zone 21, same thing. You get over here, the water generate and ignite is right in there with the starter plus the generate. Come down here to zone 4, water, generate, and ignite. Won the trial, and um, look at the cost of the yield loss. Now, as soon as you see this yield loss, I always come over and look at the acres to see if they're skewed um, high or low, and they're pretty equal. So when they're pretty equal, it's a pretty solid test. Zone 19, same thing. Well, in the end, the total yield by trial is right here for each of these. Here's the number of acres of each trial. Here's the average of the trial area. So the starter and generate was less than the starter water, generate, and ignite. The revenue less the cost is the average times my selling price minus the starter cost, because the average is already figured in the yield loss. So here's the starter type loss per acre. Starter and generate lost $22.65 an acre. Starter, generate, and ignite lost $17.80 an acre. And water, generate, and ignite, well, it didn't lose anything because that's the standard I used. So this is a good example of several things. One, we account for the variability within the field by the zone map. So we always use that as a layer in our analysis. The other thing we try to do is always get side by side replicated data across a fairly significant part of a field. So we have that. And then we simply run it through SMS Ag Leader SMS analysis, and we get this. And then, well, we don't get this, we get something, and then we have to add columns. And then this year I decided to look at cost because I get tired of looking at yield and then in my head doing the cost. I'm just going to do it on paper, and that to me is the evidence I need. So anyway, Francis Schaeffer. Well, it looks like starter in this case was detrimental economically to uh, the crop cost of production. This is Francis Schaeffer, Precision Soil Management. Thanks for listening.